5 wishes. Please come on in, take a seat, and we are just starting with the session, so you're perfect timing. And yesterday we asked you to make 5 wishes for Mahara. 5 things that you would like to see improved, 5 things that you died to have and you really can't live without. And we said we'll give you 5 things. It's because 1 wish is oftentimes kind of the standard. 3 wishes may not really be enough for the things that you would actually like to achieve. And therefore we thought, okay, we'll give you 5. And unfortunately, a lot of you actually provided us with a lot of wishes. So altogether, I think it was around 120. So in a way, I'm happy that it wasn't 500, because otherwise I would have had to rent a new apartment to spread out all the papers on my living room floor so that I can group them. But it was really great to see all the wishes listed there. And now what we'll do is we'll just take a look at some of them, because we have some themes, and then see, kind of make it interactive so that you can also tell us a little bit more about it, what you would really like to see, and that we can get a discussion going. But how did we actually arrive at the 5 big themes that we are going to look at? Well, you put your wishes into the wishing jar yesterday, all nicely written on paper. Thank you very much for writing legibly most of the time. What I did afterwards, went home, spread them out, tried to categorize them as best as possible. So this was the first step, just deciphering everything, putting it into places, and then I grouped them. So altogether we now have about 23 individual categories. Some of them are overlapping, and so here they are more easily readable. We do also have a few things that we actually already implemented. So some of the wishes aren't wishes anymore, but they have already been realized, not overnight, but in kind of a latest Mahara 1.8. And so that just shows that some people use different versions of Mahara and therefore don't always know what has already been implemented in a later version. And therefore some of the wishes we already looked into. And other things are around the look and feel, so that fonts, for example, can be manipulated more easily directly in the platform. Lots of people talked about tagging, linking to other systems, aggregations, browser plugin, assessment, bulk admin options, page-on collection organization, flexibility, social features, versioning, being more intuitive, offline access, templates, giving quick feedback, various other things that I didn't really find categories for. So sorry about those of you who ended up there. Groups, credentialing, collaboration, mobile access, collaboration across sites, and training resources. So some of the items that had a higher volume of wishes were tagging, and that also included kind of social tagging, so tagging people and not just tagging content. Then linking to others, linking to other systems, aggregating information and content from other systems into Mahara. Assessment, being more intuitive. Quite a lot of people wrote about templates. Mobile access, mobile app access and other things, and also group features. So what we'll be doing now is going to look at some of these categories. I've picked 5 because we had 5 wishes, so I thought 5 categories kind of makes for a nice thing in the next hour or so. And take about 5 minutes, potentially more time for each of these items to kind of go a little bit deeper. I'll give a very brief overview of kind of what was talked about in the category, what was wished for. And Tom will time me so that after 5 minutes we can kind of see whether there's still more need for discussions, because we definitely still have more time, but that we try to get through everything so that a lot of people here in the room will have had their say through the wishes. Before I show you the categories though, just briefly what it looks like when you look at it on a computer. I didn't go for a mind map, because some things actually belong into several categories. So I went for creating a C-map, which is a concept map. And you can see it doesn't really fit onto the screen, so I didn't want to put it onto a slide because you wouldn't really have seen anything. But it's very nice to just spread it out, and I can definitely put that up later on the website so that you can take a look also where the individual items overlap. And for some of these items, I also wrote that I kind of didn't know what was meant when there was just one word or something. Set the main portfolio page with specific pages. So if you mention that and you want to let us know more of what it is, and we don't get to that today, then please just send me an email so that we can make sure that we also record it properly and actually really know what you want. Not that you want a round thing and we end up with a square thing. Yeah, so that goes through, and that's what kind of 120 pieces of square paper look like. But now to the first thing. I think intuitiveness, being more intuitive, is on everybody's upmost wish list, way up to the top. And a lot of items in here included reducing the number of steps to get to something. So, for example, a common theme was, well, if you want to publish a journal, you first need to go into content, journals, you need to add your entry, then you need to put it into a page, and then you need to publish that to somebody in order to share it. Whereas on other systems, you just create your entry and then your entry is visible to everyone. So that was one thing. The journal functionality is quite tricky to get started with in terms of making it now easier for people to have fewer steps, so that, for example, also a journal entry or a journal gets published to a page immediately without you needing to put it in, and then also get shared directly with the people and make the sharing easier. In general, also uploading files could become a little bit easier, though it is now already possible that you can put files directly on a page. But in terms of just also uploading it from mobile devices and really making sure that everything is in the right place and that you don't have to go through so many steps to actually put things onto your portfolio page in order to make them available to others. If we take a brief look at some of the other things for intuitiveness, then we've got that Danielle wanted to have thumbnail images of uploaded files in pages, so that you don't necessarily just need to look at the file name, but you can see a little preview image and know immediately, yep, this is my file. Because right now also the very small thumbnail images for the images are way too tiny to actually see anything on them. Then we've just said place journal on a page from within journal editing screen, provide new users with easy ways to comment tasks. So, for example, make it easier to share a journal with a teacher. And then also focus on pages. Create pages and then upload artifacts directly there. Make the artifact file picker collapsible so that you don't always see all the files, but kind of only see them when it's necessary. And I think this is in particular the case for Mahara 1.8, where you can now also attach files directly to a text box, but you see all your files all the time, and so that box becomes quite long. And then we've also had a number of stickies, a number of squares that were the same. So 3 people said fewer steps to accomplish anything. And so that also shows that this is very important, that this is definitely something we need to focus on. And so I'd just like to give it back to you now. Is there anything that you would like to elaborate on, either on the items that we just mentioned or on anything new that just came to mind now that you would really like to see in terms of making Mahara more intuitive? Do you already have feedback from students or from teachers or from staff that are using it? Just so that we get a better idea of where we are at with intuitiveness and where we should be going to. Erica.
I think it's quite true about less steps. Having been at 2 colleges now and trying to get it implemented, and both colleges are looking at something like Google Docs or Ultranet, but they're only doing that because they see it as more complicated to get anything done in my portfolio. So if my principals just asked me to ask, if there's any way in which we can make it a sort of simpler step-through process for teachers, especially thinking secondary schools. I can see why tertiary is taking it on much more than secondary schools, but that I think if it was less steps, I think it would be more likely to be embraced by a larger number of teachers.
And also, if you have ideas of how to make it different or how you've already adapted the system to make it more intuitive for you, but just haven't shared it with the entire community, we'd also like to hear about that. Julian.
We had some feedback from students who are probably thinking in sort of a mobile app frame of mind with the dashboard. If this is in the My Schools portfolio, if the dashboard could be expanded to have just buttons that link direct to, so you had a journal button that would take you straight into your journal. And that straight from the dashboard, you just have a one click to go to each feature that you might want.
Do you not have the dashboard image anymore?
You still have the dashboard, but it could be expanded to have.
Make it kind of visually more appealing than
My
just
shiny
clicking on a
button
link?
just takes you straight to
Okay. Oh, and by the way, I'm not taking notes, but Erin is, for sure. David.
The intuitive concept is really important, but we have a lot of difficulty because we have English as second language speakers primarily involved in our schools. And so we said, okay, let's assume that the system isn't going to be intuitive and that almost all of these people are involved in distance learning. How do we get a creative solution for that? And we thought the answer was to actually create badges for learning how to use the system and making our tutors go to where they were located to teach it that way. Now, we've been using Mahara for 3 years and struggled with the fact that our students have this initial difficulty to overcome. But Greg and Nicola, myself, have now we've probably talked about 5 or 6 of these open badges and staged it. So you get a stage 1 badge for learning Moodle and Mahara basic functions, and intermediate badge for more advanced functions in Mahara. And then finally, an advanced badge, and this is where I take a little bit of different tactic. I actually think Google Drive is more complex to learn than Mahara. So our third badge looks at how do you use LinkedIn, Google Drive, which are the specific things that we're interested in. How do you integrate those with Mahara? But I can't tell you any results for that advanced badge because no one's done before.
But how do the students students go on with the tutorials that you give them and the badges? Do they help them get started with Mahara?
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely. The fact that you earn a badge is a great incentive for an adult learner.
I think that's very good to hear for Scott, who gave a presentation on badges yesterday and how they might be able to be implemented in Mahara. Currently, just in case you have not really heard too much about badges yet, if you are a Moodle user, you can easily issue badges to your students. And then there is a plugin currently for Mahara that allows them to display these badges, but they need to go via the Mozilla Backpack first. So you have your Moodle, export your badges into the Mozilla Backpack, and then you can make them visible in Mahara. And we've also explained that in the user manual. There's currently only a plugin, but hopefully once Mozilla opens up its APIs and allows others to be backpacks as well, then we can look into the development work for making Mahara a backpack so that Mahara becomes the store for all badges. Because essentially Mahara can still be a personal learning environment where you keep everything lifelong, and then it would make a lot of sense to just take your badges from Moodle and make them directly visible in Mahara without having to go through a second step. And yes, if you want to know more about badges, I'd encourage you to check out Scott's presentation or just search for open badges online. And just as a side note, you will all be getting at least one badge too. So after the conference, if you haven't earned a badge yet, you will certainly have done so in a few days and can start exploring that functionality as well and seeing whether that could be something motivating for you, your students, your teachers, and your staff. Richard.
Yeah, Kristina, just in case people don't know, there's a new organisation which had its first meeting about a week ago, I think, on a Google Hangout, which is Open Badges Australia New Zealand. So Joyce Satzing and some other people put that together. And their Twitter handle is @OB_ANZ. So I might tweet that. So
that would be great if you tweeted that.
They're actually discussing strategies for using open badges across Australia and New Zealand, because it's really taken off in the UK and some other pockets around the world.
Yeah.
So they're trying to establish this baseline for Australia and New Zealand specifically.
Yeah.
Which might be interesting.
Thank you very much,
Has
Richard.
the support of Mozilla as well.
Yes. And the nice thing is, just as a brief example, last year there was the Summer of Learning in Chicago, and a lot of organizations were involved and thousands of students, and they earned all badges throughout the summer to show off their skills and competencies and then have some credentialing on it. Shane.
Just quickly, as badges is it one badge to cover and is people badges
So the question was for the right side of the room, in case you haven't heard it, is there just one badge, or do badges also get connected up?
Ultimately, those badges will get connected up and enable a student who has successfully completed to enrol in an NZQA course called Ministry and Online Contacts. They have to earn the sequential set of badges.
just in terms of Mahara, the thing with training, like what students have to get their head around is the content page that you put the content on, and then you can share it. So, and it takes them a little while to get that content because of the blog, as you said before, it's put up and stuff.
And so that, Shane, is definitely an area that we will need to look at critically, whether we mesh it up more, whether we make it, put more buttons somewhere so that you can go more quickly from one to the other, or allow you to directly from a page to create content, more content than is already possible at the moment, so that it becomes easier to use, more intuitive in that regard, so that you don't have that big learning curve that was also mentioned on some cards here.
And the thing is, once students get it, they say, oh, it's fine. I get it now, it's fine. That's just that initial getting.
Yep.
It's,
But the idea with having a tutorial and issuing badges can be a nice interim solution until we kind of improve Mahara in the ways that you suggest and that other people also want to go. And therefore, thank you very much for sharing, David. Any other comments, ideas around intuitiveness? No? Okay, then let's look at a second big topic. And that's also been not coming out in PLE towards assessment or PLE versus assessment, but it is in the cards I find underlyingly there, and it is also a topic that has come up more and more in the wider Mahara community, because in the beginning, Mahara used to be more of a personal learning environment. The focus is on the user. The user decides what they want to put in there, with whom they want to share it, how they want to participate, whether they want to collaborate, and how they really want to build their portfolio. But now that Mahara has found wider application and use in schools, universities, and also associations, and used for credentialing, accreditation in particular, a lot of these assessment features kind of seem to be seeping through and being in demand If you really want to know what some people are already doing in that regard, I encourage you to go to Louise's and presentations right after this one in here, and then later on Misty's and Shane's and Angus, because there you'll get an idea of how people are using Mahara already for assessment, even though we actually don't really have a lot of assessment features in there, except for submitting a portfolio. And so I'd really like to get a sense from you where you see Mahara, whether you are more on the PLE end of things, so that you say, I want a lifelong portfolio for all my learners, and I give them the freedom to do anything, or whether you are on the assessment side of things and say, I want to use it very much in conjunction with my learning management system. I want to be able to give grades. I want to be able to use rubrics. I want to really do my assessment and also have the requisite reports in there so that I, as teacher, can actually look at what it is. Or whether you're somewhere in the middle of this continuum from PLE to assessment. And where would you like to see the future of Mahara? Are you saying, yes, we definitely need to have more assessment features, or it should be a choice, or what are your ideas on that? Jeremy?
If you go too far down the pure assessment thing, then you lose the point of difference. And the point of difference being it's always about the learner being in control. So there needs to be some sort of maybe an opt-in, or the best of both worlds.
So ideally the best of both worlds?
Yeah. One and all.
Yeah. Erica?
On the other side, though, when I've met sort of colleagues, they want to do Moodle because in Moodle you can set questions, you can set tasks for students to do, and as very busy teachers, if you can get a piece of software that will actually do a lot of the work for you and will give you all the grades and the statistics and everything, then that is a good point, because if we're looking at the wider aspect of it, are we having my portfolio in this respect, then we're having Moodle in terms of an assessment piece of software, then we're doing Google because then we can put out Google Forms and do surveys, or do we want something that is a central piece of software that can do all those things? And in this respect, I think we want something that can do everything.
Do everything? Yeah. Shane?
Especially I don't think it's software. So, I mean, we're using Google and Mahara together, and we've taken care of the assessment frameworks and things like that, and it works really well as a binary.
So for University of Canberra, the integration of Moodle with of Mahara with Moodle works really well, because then in Moodle you have all the assessment things, and in Mahara you have you work more freely. Who is actually using Mahara for assessment purposes? Quite a number. Yeah. Yeah. Alison.
That's probably where some more development is through the Moodle work we've done. That's what we've always done on encouragement. So Moodle develops its own isolated world, Mahara is its own world, and there needs to be some sort of communication between Moodle, teacher space, that's got the virtual classroom space, whereas Mahara is the student space, like their study space with their bedroom. So there's that kind of integration required. A more seamless one, or whatever the student does in Moodle, they can push into the Mahara, and they can also share it to Moodle.
Yeah.
And
So-
I see the grades belonging in Moodle, because that's the class, that's
Yep.
the classroom, that's where the grades belong. So while it can be assessing an item, it might even be a Google collaborative Google site or a Mahara portfolio or anything. But I see personally the grades belonging with the student in the LMS.
And that's where that's
Mahara activity in Moodle.
No, not necessarily, but why not just have, you're not going to have a standout presentation in Moodle, are you? But you can still have a grade item in Moodle that represents what happens outside Moodle. So,
Yeah, that's where we were coming from, especially in the beginning, that we say the learning management system is the teacher's space, and the teacher dictates that and decides of what students need to hand in terms of assignments and so on. And then Mahara is is the freer space where the students have control, where they have breathing room to do what they would like to do. And therefore, because a lot of people are using Moodle and Mahara together, there was not always that huge demand for having assessment features in Mahara because you can connect it to Moodle. But of course, as Alison said, that also demands that the integration gets better, that we expand on it and allow more content items to be pushed from Moodle to Mahara, and then also potentially the other way around. And then the only question for me here for this round then is, who is actually using Moodle in conjunction with Mahara? Yeah, that's not quite half, but still quite a few. But that also shows that we cannot solely rely on Moodle for doing assessment things if you are not using Moodle, but if you do still need to give formal feedback or might want to see your class directly and more closely in what you're doing. Heath.
Yeah, just with institutions using Moodle, they often come from a perspective that they are the sole provider of education for that individual, whereas often they're not. And that's why it needs to sit outside the institution or their PLE, because there might be other academic influences that the student wants to take hold of. So wherever the learning is, the student needs the option to be able to export and save their stuff.
And as you nicely said, learning does not just take place in academia, but it also takes place non-formally and informally. And so that's where the portfolio can come in quite nicely, that you can actually have multiple portfolios or also bring some informal aspects into a more formal e-portfolio that you're doing for a class. Just a second, please. Christine was first.
Thinking about separation and overlap, if I sit on one side now and think this connects to language promotion and sharing. So from a strict point of personal portfolio point of view, rather than group files and sharing, there's the other notion of do I want to share it for assessment, which may then open up and make options.
Okay, so that besides the regular sharing, we actually have a more pronounced sharing for assessment feature. Right now, this is just submitting it to a group, which is extremely basic. But kind of look more into these things of how we can make it clear that things are now shared for assessment. Shin.
From my experience helping out lecturers in using Mahara as well as our learning management system, to me, Mahara is more of a work in progress. So students do their work and make it towards the perfection to the level that they think is perfect, and try to complete the process. And for the learning management system where the assessment happens, that's the final product that you want, and you submit it to the lecturer. And even I know lecturers using the learning management system without Mahara, they ask the student to do things and like say in Moodle, they provide a space for the student to work in progress, and then finally they get the student to export, say, to PDF file or some final format to submit into a different place where assessment daily happens. So to me, I think it's if Mahara could say have some feature can say export pages into PDF file, that could be something quite nice.
Okay, so being able to export a portfolio more easily so that it could become a product that a university can then also store and also keep for assessment, because sometimes these things need to be kept for several years. And that is already something that we looked into but have not yet worked on, because it is very important that you keep assessment data in case a student does come back. But really also, and Shen said, in case it was a bit too quiet for the other end of the room, is that the learning management system is often about product, because you assess a product, whereas the e-portfolio is more seen as a process, where you kind of show your stages of development and where you can also see a process instead of just having a product at the end. And that's where the difference comes in. Alison, then Erica and Jane.
I'd be interested in using Mahara for any other elements.
Blackboard, Shen and Lisa. And Blackboard is also being used in some American universities. And then I just recently heard from somebody who might be using Canvas in conjunction with Mahara, but the only real integration that we have at the moment is with Moodle. But I do know that, and Lisa and Shen will be presenting on that later on today, as they have some integration points with Blackboard and also their they kind of student management side of things, so that users can be created automatically and groups as well. And so if you want to hear more about that, I'm not going to elaborate it so that I don't steal your thunder. Erica.
Just on the whole integration thing. In secondary schools, it's quite different than tertiary education, because we have less time to do a lot of administrative work. We can teach up to 180, 200 students a year. And for a lot of people, to me it's not an issue if I've got an LMS and I've got Google Docs and I've got Mahara. But for a lot of teachers, they want a one-stop shop. They don't want to go, oh yeah, I've got my marking in Moodle and I've got my students' portfolio in Mahara. And they don't want that. They want something that is there for them and it's easily accessible. They want something that's more simplified if it's Mahara, because many of them are not technology. It's not the students who've got the problem with the technology. It's not the teachers that have got a problem with the technology. And unfortunately, inside schools, the people who have the power are not the students, it's the teachers. So if the teachers give the students something to do, as Alan was saying the other day, they've got to have some reason for doing it. And therefore, for me, if you had some sort of add-on, I don't know, something that I could go to somebody and say, it's simplified, it's easy, we can do this, we can get an add-on which will give us our exams in it, and it's much more of a full product for secondary education, because that is, we're talking about different markets here, and that's what we want to hear.
And it's like using Mahara to have the grading for the portfolio as well as grades for other things as well.
That's what some do, yeah. That's what some do, yeah.
What can definitely be achieved is because it's not possible to put all the features that all the different systems can bring into one, as Shane already mentioned earlier, because they are quite specialized. And so what we can try to achieve is kind of make it more seamless. So, for example, do more with single sign-on, do more with a corporate ID, corporate design across Moodle, Mahara, and all the other sites that are being used, so that, yes, the interface from going from one system to the other is slightly different, but it's not such a big thing, like, oh, yes, I'm in something totally different now. And so that's some things that we could look into. Shane, last comment for that.
To what extent do Moodle more developers, I suppose, and the Mahara developers talk to each other or discuss plans or things like that? Or is it a mutual respect for each other that someone else has to do things?
We have not yet talked to the Moodle developers directly for MNet or MNet going away and things like that, but we are definitely planning on doing so more intensely over the next few months, so that we can get further along in that area and then also know what will be happening in terms of authentication. It's just a bit of coordination between Wellington and Perth, and Perth is always slightly behind us, so kind of finding a mutual time. And also finding times between the busy schedules of both sites is can prove quite tricky, even though we do have the internet and modern communication technologies. But we are definitely wanting to do that over the next few months so that we have a better idea of what we can do. But in terms of roadmap alignment and so on, there's nothing like that happening because the Moodle is a standalone product and Mahara is also a standalone product there. Okay, so just to briefly summarize, of what I've seen is that kind of both sides of the spectrum are still needed, and also something in between, and that we need to find the balance between PLE and assessment, and then see how we can make assessment possible without making Mahara an assessment pure assessment portfolio, and without replicating all the LMS functionality, because that's why we've got the integration points. Oh, let's go to that one first. To other systems, links and aggregations. Links to other systems, and a lot of times LinkedIn was mentioned, of course, like we've already seen yesterday, but also just aggregating content from other sites within Mahara. So it is actually a two-way conversation. It is using Mahara, going out to other systems, so for example, tweeting it or putting Facebook updates on it, or just saying something that is then being pushed to LinkedIn, but at the same time also integrating content from other sites into Mahara. So yesterday, I think it was mentioned on one of the papers and not in a discussion, just getting your LinkedIn profile to show up in Mahara, or you reuse the same data. There are already a number of plugins available, in particular for Twitter, Facebook, and showing your LinkedIn profile in Mahara. But of course, that is just the beginning. The APIs are much more powerful, so that more and more could be achieved. Some of the aggregation things are already possible right now in terms of using iframes. So if you have YouTube or a lot of other things, yesterday there was Tag Nexo mentioned. And if you have an iframe on a site, please ask your Mahara site administrator to put it in so that you can start using it. Because as long as we have an iframe, we can make it available to everyone so that you can aggregate content from other sites within Mahara. Only because there's only a standard 6 or 7 given doesn't mean that this list cannot be longer. And for my portfolio, for example, we have a much longer list so that people can embed mind maps, TED Talks, other interesting social networking sites and social media sites. And on the wiki, we are also keeping a list so that it's easy for you to see what others are using and might get inspired to also make those available for you. Any other comments on linking to other systems, aggregating content? What would the ideal scenario for you look like? Seems like we've covered that.
So one of the things now we're moving to doing moderation is also that linking to NZQA, so that, I don't know, it's easy enough to send a separate to that anyway, but maybe there's another way that NZQA could actually be linked in there as well.
Yeah, that is a very good comment, and that came up not so far, but earlier in discussions, is linking to other systems so that data can be pushed. For example, NZQA, or also linking to a student management system, in the terms of not necessarily manipulating content in Mahara, but just seeing content that is in the student management system in Mahara, so that students, for example, see their grades or see reports that are kept in the SMS, or have other ways of connecting so that they have, again, everything in one spot, aggregated. And then, of course, one person also said, linking to NZQA or sending content, a file directly to NZQA instead of then putting it into a page or making that page available to somebody from NZQA and then giving it through to them that way. So these are definitely possibilities, because Mahara does have APIs, and we also have a web services plugin, so that the integration with other systems can be achieved. And that's where I see the future of a lot of other applications as well, actually, is that instead of trying to build everything in one system, so add certain functionality into Mahara that are already really well established in other systems, we should be linking to these more where possible, so that we can harness the more powerful functionalities in those systems. Sorry that you're seeming to be missing some letters. They are on my computer. It's just that the screen decided to go a little bit too wide for display on the big screen. Okay, linking aggregation. That is definitely something that is always in development, because we know that people do not just use Mahara, but kind of aggregate from a lot of other systems. Now going slightly back, templating. Templates was also one big thing, and a lot of people said, please make it easier to copy a page or copy a collection, because right now that's kind of 2 or 3 steps that shouldn't really be necessary, and therefore the question now is, for templates, yes, we should be looking into making copying easier, but is there actually something maybe more that you would like to have in terms of, do you want to have a central space where you keep all your templates, or do you actually like it that you have control over you being able to create a template directly out of your own account? Or a number of people mentioned they'd like to be able to push one template to all group members or to specific users, instead of either masquerading as the students and copying it in, or telling students you need to go over here and copy the page. What are your thoughts on templating in Mahara? Yes, please.
In my school, I created a template which consists of collection of pages, and I have, because we have 13 learning areas where I do 13 collections, and then I created a page with navigation for each of those on it, and I'd like to push the whole lot out in one go.
Yeah.
So we do it the whole cohort 100 times.
I think someone described it really well yesterday. That was like ticking the users, and then that one. Push that template to them. So, she described the
Oh, Kristina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like from the admin screen, be able to just tick the user screen, tick the users, and then just go give them, or the grouping, give them that template.
So there are 2 things: can push a template to all group members, but that of course requires that you first created a group, or then somewhere potentially on the sharing screen, tick all the students that you would like to send the template out directly. Yeah. Alison? That could be a setting, because teachers might just really need to push a template out to students, and then they don't want students to not accept it and then not do the portfolio. That is probably more where you have where you work for assessment purposes or for a specific class. Like a lot of times yesterday was mentioned by Ellen and also Sue, kind of also the templates that John is using for NCDA standards and that you're working with, where students really need to get the templates. So for those, it would be better just here you got the template. But for others that are freer, that they would need to accept a template first. And then, of course, and sometimes also the question comes up, well, my template is there, but I'm actually making a change. Can I push that out to users as well? And that's where we have so far been very reluctant, because what we see is once a page is in a student's template, then it's theirs. Then we should not be manipulating the content of the page, because the student might have already changed things around, and so we should not really take ownership of that and leave the students where they are. Paul. Sorry, Teresa.
I spent about half an hour over the drinks last night talking about this and the tension between what's the user's autonomy and like Mahara, and that's precious. And having been funding a lot of school requests over many years, it's always a tension between the way schools work and the way that Mahara is designed. But we came up with a couple of ideas. One is that the individual could say yes or no, as you suggested. Another is it could work in a course group where the individuals can't opt out. So you set up that group because it's got a degree of compulsion or status. And as the individual has to be in the group for their course, well then they have to receive the templates that are part of the course. In other words, there could be an institution setting that gave some people the ability to do that so that the students and students groups didn't annoy everybody by doing it frivolously.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I was persuaded by the force of argument heard yesterday here and at the meeting that in a school setting, and maybe even tertiary, the saving in administrative time and people making mistakes was worth that lack of learning of them learning how to do it and any autonomy issues done well. Yeah.
Okay. Teresa.
Oh, I was just thinking when you were saying about the change, you know, if there was a set template that everybody had to use, and that changed, then you would need to push it out again, maybe as a fresh page for them to then move stuff over. So, yeah, rather than trying to, as you say, try to make it right.
That's true. So really leave the pages as they are once they're in a student's portfolio, and if there's a change, then they could bring it back in. Because now that it is possible that you can copy text boxes, once you have the new template in your portfolio, you could just put that new text box into your already existing page and replace it. Mm-hmm. Colin.
One option might be version control on templates, but that would require significant back-end changes so a student would be notified there was a new version of the template and they could choose to update or not.
Mm-hmm. And then potentially merge it in, like we did now with the import of a Leap to A portfolio, where we also look at what is in the portfolio that already exists and what is in the incoming one, and then do you want to merge it? Do you want to keep the data? Do you want to delete it? Mm-hmm. And versioning and also going back in time of what students did if they did something wrong. That was also mentioned at least twice on the papers, and that is definitely something where we know that we are lacking on things because, for example, when you give feedback on a portfolio and you give it back, release it back to the student, then they can make changes, but your feedback does not match up anymore. And so that can be quite tricky if you do not have versioning and can go back to that state of the day when you gave your feedback in order to see also how have they progressed. And that is where the progression comes in again. If you really want to show a portfolio over time, you do want to kind of see how has it developed. And at the moment you always have a point in time right now status, unless of course you make backups or copy pages and then have those kind of store them individually. But then of course managing those pages comes again, which was also quite a big point. Shane.
It's almost as though you what's a wiki engine pages that will explain later some drag and drop.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's definitely where the idea of versioning comes from. So either wiki or Git versioning, where you have the possibility of just really going back to a specific state, restoring that, or checking out what it was. Mm-hmm. And we also have mobile. This is the German version of mobile, so we are having some language classes here today as well. Mobile was really, really heavily thought after. So make it easier to work on an iPad, make it easier, have an app for Android, iPad, iOS, and not to forget Mark Nichols' Windows. And really actually give us all the power on the mobile device. Don't strip out functionality like we have done now through device detection, that you can't do certain things on a mobile device because in a way they don't really make sense. But now that people do go more mobile and kind of sometimes even use that as their primary device, then of course it makes more sense to have all functionality available. And also looking at having a mobile app. We do already have 2 mobile apps, Mahara Droid, much more powerful, so Android users, yay you have all the power. Whereas iOS devices, you can pretty much only upload images and videos, so sorry about that, it's not our fault. The next generation of Mahara Droid will also be able to push text to your device, push notifications to your device. You will be able to create a journal entry directly on your phone or on your tablet and then push that into Mahara. That version is already on the Mahara Droid website. It just hasn't been released. It is there in beta, but hopefully over the next few months we'll be able to push it out so that you can use it. And so the question now is, do you need a mobile app? What do you need a mobile app for? Or would you be able just to access it in the browser with a theme that is responsive so that it adapts to the screen size and then do all your portfolio work? Shane?
Well, on that is, do they have an HTML5 app which works offline? Because we've got a mobile thing with UC now, but of course, have to be online to do anything with it. So the app still has a role in terms of being able to
Offline access.
offline access
Yeah.
and do things, and then when you go online, it will sync everything you've done.
Again, Mahara Droid users, you can do that already now, because that was one of the requirements actually for the application by Southampton Solent University, because their students are at sea. They are right at the port somewhere in southern England, and so they don't have internet all the time, or it's horrendously expensive going via satellite, but they still need to do their portfolio work, so they save everything in Mahara Droid while they're at sea, and once they reach land, immediately they turn on Wi-Fi and just push everything into their portfolio. And so that is a possibility there. Mm-hmm.
You've got to have an export page which you can create HTML5 apps with, and then build create versions for iOS and Android and any other platform as well. So that's what
Great.
the potential direction.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Shane. Richard?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is that part of Mahara philosophy to focus more on the Android side and less on the iOS side? Because I do get that distinct impression.
Why do you think that might be?
Because one is a closed system and one is more towards the open source side.
Yeah.
It's more in tune with your philosophy.
And Mahara Droid was created as a proof of concept. And there, we already know, of course, that a lot of people are using iOS devices. But at Catalyst, we work with Android because we are an open source company. And Mahara Portfolio app, which is the iOS site, is developed by Bright Cookie over in Adelaide. So if you want to get in touch with somebody over there, please see Alison. She knows who they are. And we just wanted to see what could a mobile app for Mahara look like. And then it's been taken up in particular by Southampton Solent University, and they said, well, we have more Android users than iOS, so we are catering to those in the beginning. But that does not mean that in the future we might not have a phone gap app and kind of cater to more devices or more operating systems. But for the time being, our resources are kind of a bit limited, and that's why we were still looking at Mahara Droid only.
But here's a potential revenue stream.
Yeah. So if anybody knows what we should be doing, could be doing, and also has pockets kind of that could have a little bulge on them, then that might be helpful. Heath.
Christina, talking about Mahara Hui pushing content up, which I was showing to the files area. It would be good to have offline page creation as well, so that we're creating a page can be saved to the device and then synced. A bit like the WordPress mobile app. I find that really useful.
Okay. Yes, offline access was mentioned as well. I did get the yellow card, so we do need to get to our last point, and that would be collaboration. So I've already mentioned a few times kind of group. People wanted some more group features, kind of in pushing out templates, copying pages, but also working for assessment, submitting portfolios there. But what was really, really interesting, and we could have expected that a little bit from the keynote discussion and some other discussions afterwards, is that people also want to be able to collaborate more. So not just within one Mahara site, but also across Mahara sites. So link Mahara sites to each other, be able to go into another one. And that is definitely a theme that has come up a bit more, especially because people are moving around or are in an academic setting, but actually are also working at school. And that was one reason why the School of Education from the University of Canterbury is actually on myportfolio.school instead of .ac, because they need to work with the teachers. And so needing to be on the platform where the teachers then will actually be interacting with the students is more helpful instead of being on another platform and having also slightly different features there because the versions do not always match. And Mahara does allow you to connect to another Mahara site, but what we would need to be looking into is kind of how to expand that again, how to make that integration between different sites easier, and really look into when you have your portfolio on one Mahara site, but you want to interact with people on another Mahara site. Is that possible? How can that be possible? Can people look at your portfolio as well? How would you need to share it? Or eventually, maybe if somebody has really, really deep pockets, we could have a universal Mahara site for everyone that everyone can connect to, and where also privacy issues, that was one thing that Christoph always mentioned on his papers, where privacy still is respected. Because if we have a lot of different users from primary school, sometimes even kindergarten, up to old age, then of course we also know that there are potential points of friction and problems that can be more, instead of where we, like on myportfolio.school, where we only have students and teachers, but nobody else who could do marketing on it and things like that. So there are a few things that we do need to keep in mind when looking at larger Mahara instances, but it's definitely something that seems to be of interest in terms of collaboration. So any more thoughts on collaboration either within one Mahara site or across Mahara sites? That is not the case. Then I'd like to invite you, though, not to leave it at that, because what we will be doing is we will be cataloging your wishes if they aren't already on our Mahara wish list, so that we definitely capture them not just here for the conference and in a concept map, but also on our wish list tracker, so that we kind of are reminded at intervals what people would like to see. And you are, of course, also invited to share further information, further thoughts around any of the things that you put onto your squares yesterday in the community or in the communities where you're at. On myportfolio.school, we do have a discussion group, so anybody is very welcome to give us back reports or wish list items there, because we take them back to the wider community. If you do not have a community on your Mahara site, please do use the wider one, so mahara.org. Share your ideas with other community members around the world, participate in user groups, see how you can hook up with others, let us know what's bugging you, what you really, really like, and what you would like to see in the future, so that we can continue on these discussions. Because we don't just want to make that a one-off exercise and say, okay, thanks for your 120 wishes, now we're just putting them aside because we can't get to them and we are not looking at them, but we do put them into our system so that we are aware of them. Erin took notes, and that we can always keep these things in mind and see how we can include some of them in each version of Mahara. But of course, if your pockets are deep, then and you would like to have one or more features more quickly than the development team might be getting to, then you're also very welcome to contact us so that we can get in features quickly for you. Because kind of money rules in that regard as well. Even though Mahara is open source, all the developers and me as well do need to eat at some point. And therefore, having somebody who pays for features, and there are a lot of you here in the room who are actually supporting the development of Mahara very actively, really, really helps us to bring the software further along. And with every version of Mahara, we do have contributions from the community, either in code or in funding, so that we can give all of you lots more features. And Erin will be mentioning some of them for Mahara 1.9 later today. Shane, last question.
There is just one institution. We have a preschool where we've got
Mm-hmm.
and as far as I can remember, last time people in the Victoria University were still searching by names relating to the institution.
Yes.
So total separation of institutions in that regard, projects being able to say that separation in that space.
Yeah, that would be needed, and the specifications for that are already available in for the isolated institutions. And that is what is holding back even a countrywide implementation of Mahara for everyone, because you do not necessarily want primary school students contacted by somebody working in a company wanting to sell them something. So we do need to be aware of privacy things, because it is important that we do protect the students, not kind of protecting in the sense of we want to shut them off of everything and kind of cuddle them, but really just protecting from, other things. Because on Facebook they aren't really allowed to be there until they are 13 either. So how should it be that then on Mahara they could be contacted by somebody when they are just 5 or 6? And so that is why myportfolio.school is separate from .ac, so that we have this separation. And if we had isolated institutions, then that could potentially make a lot of things easier and really also allow more people to embrace multiple institution settings there. Well, thank you very much for all your thoughts, for really thinking hard about what you would like to have in Mahara. Please continue to let us know. You're not limited to 5 wishes. Use the forum discussions or also Launchpad, where our bug and wish list tracker is, just to put in your thoughts so that the development team and also the wider community is aware of them. And then we'll see how much we can get done in releases, and maybe you're also contributing. We know that Christoph, for example, is very keen on putting his booklet plugin into Mahara, so that's going to be really exciting. And maybe we are getting to the first step already tomorrow during the Hackfest. So you'll be seeing some really, really nice work coming up over the next few months. And now it's just for me to wish you a nice second day at Mahara Hui. All the best in the presentations. Please discuss with the presenters, let them know your thoughts, comment on things, and then we will be seeing each other back here all in this room at 4:05 for the conference closing. Have a nice day.